everybody. Charles from GMAT Ninja here. Today I'm talking to Eric Chambers. He's the Director of Market Development Americas, also a former admissions director of sorts at Wharton School of Business. We're going to talk about the executive assessment today, and in particular, lots of mythology out there about what the EA is for, how it's different from the GMAT, how it's the same. We're going to unpack all that. Eric was very instrumental in creating the EA in the first place. Eric, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Eric, before we launch into everything about the EA, can you say a little bit about what you do at GMAC?
Yeah, so I'm basically a liaison between the schools that use our product, services, and research offerings and GMAC. So I'm constantly talking with them, trying to gather as much information as I can from them of what's working, what's not working, what's going on out there, and bringing that information back to GMAC so that we can improve our, again, product, services, and research. So we do a lot to help to generate interest and information about the graduate management education industry. And then also helps to support candidates as well that are going through this process.
So superficially, the EA looks a lot like the GMAT. You've got three sections: quant, verbal, and a third section that's data-focused integrated reasoning on the EA. Mm-hmm. So what candidates are often saying to us now is, hey, is the EA just a shorter, light version of the GMAT? So what I'd love to ask you, Eric, is Can you tell us a little bit about where the EA came from and how it was designed for a very different purpose than the GMAT?
Right. So EA was launched in 2016. It was a couple years before that some world-class executive MBA programs came to us and said, look, we love the GMAT. It's highly predictive. We like the fact that people have to prepare for it. In other words, it gets them back into the study mode, gets them back to getting ready for school. Helps dust the cobwebs off, all that kind of stuff. But we're dealing with very busy people. And these candidates have asked if there's something that they could take where they could show their readiness that doesn't involve maybe the amount of prep and the length of actually taking the GMAT. And so they came to us. And of course, we always listen to schools. That's what we do. We're a nonprofit association of the world's leading business schools. So that's our whole business, is talking with schools and trying to figure out what they need and how we can support them and their candidates. And so that's where EA came from. And so there's ultimately they said, look, we need something that's efficient. So it can't be too long. We need something that involves an appropriate amount of prep. They like the idea that you would take about 20 to 30 hours, maybe on average. They like the fact that there are some candidate-friendly features that specifically fit with busy professionals. So the ability to reschedule as often as you want at no cost, the ability to send your scores when you're ready to as many schools as you want at no cost. And so it really hit the mark eventually, when we did roll it out. And so those schools are very happy. Those programs are very happy. But now, as you know, the EA is now accepted at not just IMBA programs, but part-time programs, online programs, executive master's programs in general. And now the most recent group, the full-time programs. And so we're very happy with how it's evolved, and the schools and the candidates that have taken have been very happy and very pleased with it.
So I guess we'll stick with the executive folks for now, and then we'll move on and talk a little bit about how to think about your scoring as maybe a full-time applicant or part-time applicant. For the executive MBA applicants, how should they think about their score goals? So what's a good score, and how is thinking about that different than people might expect?
Yeah. So when you think about what's a good score, that's really talking with the schools or looking on their websites to look at their class profile, because the schools will provide typically a median or an average. They'll give a mid 50%, mid 80% range. But most importantly, just to remember, these schools are looking at this exam as a readiness exam. And so every school is a little bit different as to, well, what is a score that would indicate that this person can handle the academic demands of our particular school and at this particular program. So the average of everybody that takes the GMAT is around a 150 or so. So that's what I hear a lot of times when I do webinars with schools and they say, well, what should I target? And they say something around that 150 mark. But again, that varies a little bit from school to school. But again, the schools are transparent, I think, with what they put on their website. But also, if you don't know, give them a call. They'd be happy to answer that question.
So it might sound subtle, Eric, but you say, okay, so the executive assessment is designed to help show readiness. And we could say something similar about any standardized test.
Right.
But I think where this is different is it's very explicitly designed to basically check the box in a sense, it sounds like.
Good point.
So if you hit a certain threshold on the EA and it's a threshold that your target executive MBA program is happy with. You've checked the box, they move on, and it's
Right.
not meant to sort and stack. Is that a fair
That's a
assessment?
great point. Thank you for pointing that out. And sometimes that number on EA may vary a little bit, just again based on other parts of your application. So depending on what your educational background, depending on what you do at work, things of that nature. So they're taking all that in mind to answer a really important question, an ethical question for them to answer is, can this person handle the academic demands of the program? As soon as they have that, move that aside. Now they're looking at everybody, their work experience, their recommendations, interview, extracurricular activities, all of that. They're looking at how is this person going to benefit from being here? How are they going to contribute while they're here? So again, this is just one piece of a much broader picture. And again, executive candidates just bring so much wealth of experience to the table and life experience that's usually where the admissions decisions are really made. But again, they need to know that the person can handle the academic demands of the program, and that's where EA is, incredibly helpful.
And not to beat a dead horse here, Eric, but I
Yep.
get questions from applicants all the time. Oh, I need to get even executive MBA applicants. Oh, I see that the average is 155, but if I get a 162 on the EA, my odds are better. But it sounds like you're suggesting that, generally speaking, that's not the case, because if you're ready, you're ready. You fit into the right level, you're okay, and then it's about everything else. Is that going too far to say, hey, 162 is not likely to do much for you that a 155, for example,
Right,
wouldn't?
right. I mean, other than sort of, oh, that's impressive, and then they go right back to what it is of looking at everything else, which is going to be much more important in that area. So, and again, I think even your 155 is high, right,
Right.
amongst even some of the best business schools, best MBA programs in the world. Now, some of them are at that level, but many of them are lower than that. So again, this is why it's so important to look at each individual school and each individual program. And if you have any questions, reach out to them.
So increasingly, as you mentioned earlier, EA is more and more accepted at full-time programs as well and part-time programs,
Mm-hmm.
so not just executive programs.
Mm-hmm.
We get lots of questions in particular from those full-time applicants going, well, if I'm applying to a full-time program, how should I think about this? What's a good score? How should I think about that decision of taking the EA versus the GMAT? So can you say a little bit about where is the EA accepted at the moment for full-time
Yeah,
programs? And
sure.
how do you think about that decision if you're a test taker?
Yeah, well, two things really important. One is the executive assessment is accepted at a lot of executive programs, right? Because that's where it started and that's where it had gone. It is still picking up momentum amongst the full-time programs. Currently, it's accepted at about 35 schools, mostly in the United States. We're also seeing Europe. We're also seeing maybe a few schools in Asia. So that will continue to evolve. So that number will increase. So I think it is obviously very important that when candidates are thinking about EA, which is a great option for candidates, that they first look to see what does the school require and to see if that's an option that you can have. So for executive programs, again, almost all of them are accepting the executive. If they're requiring a test or they accept a test, I bet you EA is on that list. For full-time, that's still an evolving process. So you need to be able to look at that list and say, okay, of the schools that I'm targeting, do they accept EA? And you might find out that, 3 of the 4 do, and you have to decide then, well, how important is that fourth school? And how does that factor in your decisions? So you can also pick up the phone and call the school and say, would you be willing to accept an executive assessment if I take it? And they'll tell you, they'll be transparent. They may say no, and that will then you factor that into your decision.
Okay, Eric, I want to finish up with a couple of nitpicky questions, kind of little
Sure.
details of the executive assessment that we get from candidates all the time. You get asked pretty often, why aren't there percentile rankings out there? So when candidates ask, hey, what's a good score? And they go looking around for percentiles, they don't typically find them anywhere. Why is that? Is that by design?
Yeah, it's actually based on the feedback from schools. So when we, again, went down this road with these schools, they said to us, we want this to be a readiness exam. We do not want candidates to be sorting and stacking themselves in this process because we're not going to be using these scores to sort and stack candidates either. Again, we're looking at a sort of a threshold. It might be a little bit of a window of that threshold of where we feel comfortable with candidates. And so, yeah, I mean, candidates do get their percentile on their own score report. Schools do get that, but we do not publish that. And that is not what people should focus on. They should really focus on, again, what the school has said, what is that general range that the school feels comfortable with, and then move on from there.
Perfect. Last little detail question I get all the time. Sentence correction is gone from the GMAT, but it's still in the executive assessment. Briefly, just a sentence or two, can you tell us a little bit about why that might be?
Yeah, it's the same thing of working with schools to talk with them about what these assessments should look like to best serve them and to best serve their candidates. And so, as you know, we just recently launched GMAT, the newest version of GMAT, which was also known as GMAT Focus Edition. And sentence correction is no longer included in there. Well, that was because we had a lot of discussions with schools. They said they wanted a more efficient exam, which meant we have to take some things out. So that was one of the things they said, and we felt comfortable with because it didn't compromise the exam for that regard. So that's where it was removed. We have not gone down that road with EA just yet. So again, we were very focused on the newest version of the GMAT. EA so far. And the other thing too is we don't have schools calling us going, take it out. So they like what they're seeing, again, as a result, and those candidates are performing very well academically in their program. And so in some ways, why change something if it's working well? But we'll continue to listen as we always do.
Perfect. All right, if you have more questions about the EA, we're going to stick a couple links in the video description so you can learn a little bit more about the structure of it. And that's it for today. Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you for watching, everybody.
Thank you.